Yeah, Valérie. Yeah. Okay. So, oh, okay. Recording. So we have to to be careful.
Yes, but thank you.
Okay. So we're still. I mean, we still have 10 minutes to go, so we're good. So who's around? Andrea. Chris. Okay. C'est bon?
So, oh, I'm going to turn on my video. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
I don't know if we kind of explained what this event is and what it means for Grenoble. We do this event yearly, the Forum 5i. So this conference this panel is coming at the end of the day, where downstairs we've actually had an exhibition for the entire day with about, I would say, 10 or 12 startups who are from France. I think most of them are from France. And then it was accompanied by a venture event where there were startups who came from around the world to pitch to investors. And so it's kind of, we're at the conclusion of the event, and it's kind of nice because there were quite a lot of people here today. I would say, I don't know, maybe 100, at least 100 people who were downstairs walking around, and then in the auditorium we had events going on throughout the day. And so this is really capping off the end of the day. I'm hoping that we have people who actually come. I think there'll be a lot of people who join by video conference, but I'm hoping that people will come also. There'll be a little bit of physical presence.
Very good.
Excellent.
Andrea, is this one of the first events that is being held in person again in the area?
So yeah, it's one of the bigger events that's being held in person. I think there were a couple of events, smaller things that have happened throughout the year when the situation has allowed for it. But this is definitely one of the bigger events that's gone on, and indoor events, because it was all in the conference center today. So But the COVID rates in France are very, very low right now. And we haven't had an impact from the Delta variant yet. So we're kind of
we are still very cautious about it though, because there's no doubt that it's already here and that we are still have to be, to keep being very careful.
Yeah, I think it's the same all over, right? I mean, people are cautiously optimistic about, and certainly are wanting to start to do things somewhat normally again.
Hello, everybody.
Hello.
Good morning.
Hi.
Good afternoon for us, but okay,
so Gabriel has mountains behind him and it's just a screensaver. But today, to give you an idea, today the weather is just about the same as behind Gabriel. If you looked out the window, you would probably see just about what's behind him.
And it's pretty nice. It's not too hot, and I'm not saying this for Laura. Sorry. How is it going in British Columbia, Laura?
The weather just moved east.
Oh, okay.
It's good. It's down to a very pleasant 21 degrees instead of 41. It's a world of difference.
Wow.
Yeah.
Careful, Bruce. It's heading your way.
Yeah, I'm actually a little closer than normal to that because I'm actually in the Chicago area instead of New York. And that's because of the holiday weekend coming up, the 4th of July holiday in the United States. So a lot of people are from today onwards will be disappearing from work.
Titouan, I'm sorry, on the back of it. Who is missing? I think we have Valérie, Tabea, Laura, Chris, Bruce, Gabriel, and
Rania is missing.
Rania is missing, yes. Gabriel, can you maybe resend the connection to Rania? Because if I remember correctly, she had some trouble getting the email sometimes. So I just want to make sure she will be here. So we have 3 minutes before we start. Here they are actually calling for the participants for the table ronde. Okay. Titouan, you tell me when she joins. Because
Yes.
no, not yet. We still have a few minutes, but then I won't be able to wait too long. Okay. I will wait just 1 more minute so we are sure that we have every one of the panelists on board. Okay. It seems we are missing one panelist, but I will start anyway, and we'll just hope she will be able to join us. Hello, everyone. It is really my pleasure and my honor to moderate this international panel at the Forum 5i. This is a new feature for the Forum 5i, which is a startup event that's almost approaching its 25th birthday in Grenoble. And we've been trying to set up this international event for quite a few years, and we are really happy to be able to do this even in a very difficult year. Why is it important? Well, it is because, first of all, for the Grenoble startups and also for the startups all over the world, they have to address international issues from the very start. Whether it's because they are addressing international markets or because they attract international investors, or because also we have international entrepreneurs deciding to set up a startup in a totally foreign country, even during the pandemic. So, and how to do so better than actually ask and leverage the support we have in great partners in international ecosystems all around the world. We already have some connections, and we have some great regions that we know, and that we have in these regions, we have great supporters. So we thought it would be a really great idea to invite all these people to talk about what's happening around the world during the COVID era. And I want to also to note and to attract your attention to the fact that here in the French Alps, we have also set up a soft landing international program that aims at supporting international entrepreneurs from and to the French Alps. But I won't dwell too long, and I will start right away by inviting the panelists from our panel to introduce themselves. First of all, also, I want to thank the organizers, to the back office also, and also, of course, all the panelists to participate into this panel. So I'll start with my neighbor here, Gabriel from Grenoble, and ask him to introduce himself briefly.
Thank you, Véronique. Thank you all. Hello, everybody. So just a few words about me and myself. I'm in charge of international economic affairs for the Métropole of Grenoble, which is a local government in charge of various local policies, such as urban development, energy, environment, waste management, etc. And here the main preoccupation for us now is about economic development and innovation. So I'm in charge of international relations within this general scope of economic development, which consists in connecting people mainly, either by welcoming delegations, participating to events, or organizing events connected to the world, also by organizing mission or participation to exhibition abroad, and by building European or international projects with local stakeholders and of course partners from abroad. So in very short, what I do and what I do within the Métropole, which is in a local government in charge of many things, and more specifically for economic development, the Métropole support local economy with various kind of actions. Once again, by connecting and putting together local stakeholders, companies with laboratories, etc. By providing facilities like incubators, technological platform, etc. By supporting program and projects, RD projects in particular. Also by proposing infrastructures to public infrastructures as a field to test local technologies. And yeah, and more or less that's all about economic development. So in very short.
Thank you, Gabriel. Now, if we go on to our next speaker, Tabea from the city of Essen in Germany.
Yes, bonjour, je m'appelle Tabea Lersmacher, but I switch into English now. Hello and welcome everyone from the scale-up city Essen, as we call it, in the metropolis Ruhr in Germany. I work for the startup team at the Economic Development Agency for the city, and we support and advise companies based here in Essen, for example, in topics like expansion and investment projects, acquisition, of skilled workers, for example, subsidies, R&D topics, and we are working as the central contact point and service partner for economic development. And we are helping out me, especially with my team, startups who are interested in maybe opening an office as well here in Essen, so we can get you in touch with the local economy here. And a little bit about the city of Essen. It is in the center of the metropolis Ruhr, and within 1 hour you can reach more than 11 million people with more than 5 million inhabitants. Is the Ruhr metropolis on the one hand a great number for potential customers, and on the other hand a high number of potential specialists. So that is also underlined by the high number of students, 280,000 students in 21 universities just in the region here, and more than 50 non-university institutions as well. So this is the framework that we offer for startups to grow and scale here.
Thank you, Tabea. And so if we go to another continent, I will just continue with Bruce in New York, upstate New York.
Thank you, Véronique. And I'm very pleased to be part of this event and to interact with all of the participants here today. So my name is Bruce Toyama, and I'm the Business Development Director for New York Creates. New York Creates is a economic development organization structured as an affiliate of the Research Foundation for the State University of New York, which is the largest public higher learning institution system in the US. So our focus is on developing public-private partnerships that drive economic growth by focusing on the semiconductor industry and leading edge technologies that enable some of the changes that I'm sure many of you in the audience are familiar with today. So research and development at the leading edge is done as much now by startup companies and early stage companies who are delving into areas such as quantum technologies and integrated photonics and new architectures that enable artificial intelligence end uses. So the startup arena is a very active space for our organization. And just a bit about myself, I've also been part of 3 different startups, 2 in the United States in the clean energy space, and also one overseas in Southeast Asia, which was some years ago. So I will pass it over back to you, Véronique, and thank you again for inviting me.
Thank you, Chris. So yeah, you definitely got firsthand experience as well. I was supposed to hand the mic to Rania, but I think she's still not here. So we'll just go to Chris in Wales and see what he has to say about his organization and what he's doing there.
Thank you, Véronique. And very similar background to Bruce, actually. My name is Chris Meadows. I'm currently director of CS Connected, which is the cluster organization that's growing and trying to grow the community of compound semiconductor organizations within Southeast Wales. I started with British Telecom, a very large organization, but have been involved in 2 startups since then. One was a spin-off of British Telecom back in, I don't dare say, but 30 odd years ago. And then around 30 years ago, I was part of the founding team of a company called IQE, an epitaxial wafer manufacturer of semiconductor materials, starting with a handful of people. And now we have 10 sites around the world, employing around 700 people. But I'm now transitioning to look after and to attempt to grow the number of organizations that we have within the region that have joined IQE over the years. We now have around 12 organizations in Southeast Wales that concentrate on these compound semiconductor products, which feed into quantum technologies, sensing technologies, power, and so on. And the intent is to grow through both organic growth of the existing organizations in the region, helped by the academic organizations, Cardiff and Swansea universities, but also to encourage startups and direct investment so that we can really build on the core of the expertise that we have within the region. So lots of challenges ahead. Having been through startups, I know exactly what's involved and what the challenges are. And we're hoping that working with Welsh and UK governments that we can encourage a lot more startups and spin-offs from universities to add to the ecosystem that we have here in Wales.
Thank you, Chris. And just as a reminder, Swansea University, whom you mentioned, is actually a very active partner and collaborates with Grenoble-Alpes University. So that's another connection that we have. If I go then to Vancouver, I mean, it's not exactly Vancouver, British Columbia, and I'd like to have Laura explain what she does here. And fortunately, she told us that it's a little bit it's a little bit cooler now because they experienced a really dreadful heat wave. So Laura, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Véronique. I'm going to jump in. Thank you. I appreciate it. Yes, it's much more pleasant today. My name is Laura Bach-Blumes. I'm the Managing Director of Empowered Startups European Operations. Our international head office is here in British Columbia, in Vancouver. We also have operations in France and in Portugal, as well as in Asia and Vietnam and Hong Kong, and most recently in the Western United States and in our province, neighborly province next door in Alberta. Our focus is on very early stage startups. We facilitate the technology transfer from public research institutions into startups with the goal of those startups scaling internationally. And we also offer programming. We partner with Indigenous communities locally and with high schools and universities in the United States and Canada in offering entrepreneurship training. A little bit about myself. My background is in startup as well, but it is at the scale up stage. So typically I have been involved at the point where it is that the startup looks like as though it's going to succeed and we're ready to scale nationally or scale internationally. And so I've done that within the US and from a startup that was based in Canada and is still going here. So it's great to be involved in startup in all its different forms and varieties.
Thank you, Laura. And yeah, I can see that we have all of our panelists have a lot of experience in either supporting startups or having created startups or scaling up startups. Now I'd like to hand on the mic to Valérie, who is also a specialist in startup support, but also has created her own startup. So Valérie, how about you introduce yourself?
Thank you very much. Thank you for the invitation. I am Valérie Sabatier Vallejo. I have a PhD in management sciences and strategy, more exactly. And I have a first career as an academic in strategy. And I also have a background of master's in biochemistry and in business. And that led me to create recently Benu Blanc. It's a startup company based in Grenoble, and we are creating a beauty linen. We use silk molecules and silk textiles to create new beauty rituals for everybody, in fact. And the idea is to use night in order to promote well-being and beauty, improve sleep, improve hydration, moisturizing of the skin and hair. So we have different products. We evolve on the prestige cosmetics market, a very, very competitive market, in which it's very important to bring science. And we are entering this market with this specialization in silk beauty. So we try to be very, very original. We build on the competencies on the French territory and very, very much on the competencies that we find around Grenoble. And I'll tell you more about that a bit later. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So I don't think Rania has been able to join. Well, I hope she can actually hop in during the panel, because she was representing part of the world that's also very important, and also she was another woman entrepreneur. You did notice that in this panel, and I'm really happy about it, there are lots of women, so that's very good, because it's not often the case when it comes to technology or startups. So here we have a majority of women, so I'm really happy about this. I come then to my second question, which were more like, we'll just go backwards and start with Valérie again afterwards, about some facts and figures, or maybe just to point out, not all the facts and figures that you put in the slides, because basically all the public will be able to have these slides after the panel, but maybe to point out either an important fact or an important figure related to either their startup or their business of what they do. So Valérie, it's for you again.
Thank you. We are very lucky at Benu Blanc because we have a very rich territory around us, which is also a very big problem for us because we have too much deep tech around Grenoble, and investors are coming for deep tech technologies, very high tech startups, and so they forgot about other kind of startups working on luxury products, beauty products, and a very different kind of things. So for us, the territory is very interesting because it's super dynamic. And for what we do in research and development, developing silk molecules and developing new products, it's great. But it's also a challenge because in terms of visibility, it's challenging to be seen as a beauty startup in the deep tech environment that we have. And that's a pity because Grenoble and all the area between Grenoble and Lyon since the 40th century has been expert in silk textiles, and it's extremely dynamic. And that is a great opportunity that we do use now with the development of Benu Blanc, because all our partners are around Grenoble. And during COVID, that was very important because they kept running, and we also bypassed this problem of distance and having a value chain that still works during COVID. So for us, it was great to have everyone, producers and also those doing the manufacturing and so on, around Grenoble. And the territory in that sense has been extremely helpful during COVID.
Okay, and we'll come to this a bit later on when it comes to the how the startups have actually been able to weather the pandemic. Of course, that's for sure. Just a few. Could you maybe? So you created your startup in which year? How old is your startup? Just to give you the main fact.
Main facts, sorry, Véronique. We founded the company. We are two co-founders in January 2019. And our first products reached the market in October 19 because we started earlier on our products and then founded the company. Reached the market in October, and since then we are commercializing our products. One of our products won a great prize, which is the Victoire de la Beauté. That's something very prestigious in France for the innovativeness of the product. And we are currently raising funds, and that's a big challenge in the moment too.
Okay,
so we are growing.
Yeah, we'll come back to this later on. Laura, what if you would pick up a fact or a figure from your ecosystem and your what would it be, Laura?
Well, I would jump in and explain how it is that we have changed even in the last 50 years. So British Columbia is, as noted, is the westernmost province. We have been, I would say, in the last, arguably the last 40 years, but certainly in the last 20 years, there has been a tremendous shift and focus to go from primary industries. So we had great strength in mining, in food production, which we still do. We have a tremendous port in Vancouver. And so it's been a lot of raw materials to shift towards technology. And we have tremendous universities in that regard, and but now the emphasis is on commercializing, as opposed to where before it was really just simply on primary production. So I think of it as being, we used to be a province of fisheries and logging, and now we're a province of fintech and virtual reality. And it's been interesting because we have been third historically, and we always kind of look at Toronto and Montreal as being first and second. We see this change in shifting in funding. We continue to be third, but the gap is narrowing, and our connections to Asia are strengthening. They were there before, but they're stronger than they were. And again, like I think of Montreal and Toronto and how it is that they're complementary ecosystems which have great ties to New York and London. You look at Vancouver, our complementary ecosystem is Seattle, and we have great ties to Mumbai and Shanghai. Different, great, different. That would be us.
Thank you. That's evidently quite a change. If Chris, what would be your input on this particular pointing out other particular figure or a particular fact from your background?
Sure. Well, first of all, most of the semiconductor industry has very long lead times, and so from startup to market penetration tends to be quite long. The main partners within the cluster in South Wales have been established for more than 30 years. But as I said earlier, we're really trying to attract in both startups and potentially foreign direct investment into the region. Already, although pretty much under a lot of NDAs, we have 3 or 4 startups within the region. And these tend to congregate, as they do generally around semiconductors, around anchor companies. So in Europe, Grenoble, Eindhoven, around Dresden and Leuven, there are around about 800 companies employing 150,000 people. And that tends to be the nature of the industry, but it tends to be vertically integrated. What we're attempting to do in Wales is to create an open access centre so that it encourages the startups to have fabulous operations so that they can concentrate on the design and the end product. And so far, over the last 5 years, we've attracted both private and public investment of almost $1 billion. across a number of ecosystems that form the CS Connected cluster. And we currently have, I mentioned 12 key companies, but with startups and with new inward investment possibilities or close to arriving in the region, we have around 20 businesses that are now calling Wales home. So we think that's something that will get to a critical mass that will then see us on the world stage as being the place to go for compound semiconductors.
Thank you. And yes, and compound semiconductors, you can see, is really critical, as we can see in the world. You know, everyone is talking about the shortage of power electronics, and especially for the needs of the automotive industry. So we definitely can see how this is a good choice. Tabea, could you please maybe point out one important figure or one important fact concerning your ecosystem?
Yes, thank you. Yeah, because we would like to point out that we are the hotspot in Germany for especially B2B startups. And that is because next to 9 out of the Germany's 100 top selling companies who are alone in Essen, there are really a lot of successful medium-sized companies and hidden champions here whom startups could work with. So in Essen, we have the focus industries, on the one hand, the digital health, because we have a lot of hospitals and nonprofit sponsors associations and the state-owned Universitätsklinikum University Hospital, and they have a lot of research, especially during COVID, and a lot of projects going on with startups as well, in terms of smart hospital projects and connections there. So we are really good at that. And on the other hand, we have the energy sector. For example, we have RWE and E.ON, Germany's largest energy companies, who have their headquarters here in Essen. So we call ourselves the powerhouse of Europe. The spectrum includes not only the fields of energy generation and supply through energy technology and the energy trading, but also energy research. So we are also the host of the biggest trade fair eWorld, Energy and Water, where I think Grenoble was also at the last years where it happened still. And that is something that we are really focusing on. And for the record of the startup ecosystem, we have gladly some business angels networks from Germany based here in Essen, which is really good for our startups, and venture capital funds from RAG and Evonik, two energy based companies as well, and Kask Capital and Gründer von Ruhr, who are also investing in deep tech startups as well. And I think I'm doing this job for about 3 years now, and we have seen the numbers of startups that we are definitioning as scalable business cases with high potential up to 10 years on the market. And we can say that the number of startups had doubled for the last 2 years. And we have now about 100 startups with almost 1,000 employees. So that's a big push for our startup ecosystem as well.
Thank you, Tabea. And I will just finish with Gabriel about, if you could point out some of the key figures about the startup landscape in Grenoble-Alpes, which is, as Valérie said, pretty much deep tech oriented, but not only. So if you could give us the main figures or one particular figure you'd like to highlight.
Yes, just to complete this photography of the Grenoble environment, I think the main idea is to have, to understand the context is the concentration of innovative factors in Grenoble, such as facilities, international facilities and European facilities as well. Labs representing almost 20,000 researchers. fabs, of course, with a strong industrial heritage, and strong support from local governments. So these four components have led to a strong innovative scene, and the result is that we benefit from the presence of about 500 startups in the region of Grenoble. So it's an important result, representing also around 5,000 jobs. So I think this idea of concentration of factors is very important. But to comment also the idea of deep tech, is true that the historical heritage of the industry in Grenoble, from energy to metallurgy, etc., has led to the deep tech. But we also have some other sectors very well represented, such as health, chemicals, but also, as you can see behind me, sport and mountain. So it's a bit wider than only deep tech and semicon, which is also a very important industry in Grenoble. And the third aspect of the context is that the context is very open to the world, with the economy and the companies, with the university and the R&D facilities. The population itself is quite mixed, and a lot of international representatives are in the territory, and at least connections to the world, either institutional connections, economical connections, scientific connections as well.
Thank you, Gabriel. And I won't skip over Bruce. Sorry, Bruce. Please tell us about the facts and figures about the startup landscape in your region.
Sure, and I'll try and be as brief as possible. The one area on this chart that I thought would be of interest to the audience, given the theme of this panel today, is the impact of the COVID period on the motivation for entrepreneurs to start up businesses in this period. And you can see in that second column, the top row, by the way, are the national figures for all of the United States in the year 2020. And the figures below in red and in green, I think it is, are the figures for New York State in 2019, so pre-pandemic, and 2020 through the main portion of the pandemic period. So the figures that caught my attention when I was going through this information is in the second column, which speaks to the motivation of entrepreneurs to start businesses. And nationally, there was quite a sharp drop off. So in other words, this metric speaks to people who were starting businesses because of necessity rather than by choice. So nationally, that the number of startups that were created by people who did so under some sort of necessity, for example, losing a job, that sort of thing, went up quite a bit. In New York, the impact, New York State, the impact of that was muted, and runs pretty substantially higher than the national average. So that was an interest. So this was something I spoke about with others in the ecosystem that I'm connected to ask about, possible explanations for that. So as it turns out, upstate New York, which does not include New York City itself, but each of the urban areas in New York State has a history of corporate success in companies like General Electric, for example, which is in the area I live in, Kodak and Xerox in the imaging fields were leaders for many, many decades. And they were based in Rochester. Syracuse and Buffalo also had, corporate entities that were quite strong in their particular industry. So the legacy of those sorts of talent pools have started to translate into startup activity over time, and that's one of the explanations that that came through in some of the discussions of that. So this data comes from the Kauffman Foundation, which is a private nonprofit that is active in both providing funding to encourage entrepreneurship, as well as doing research on the impact of that funding, not only their own, but funding overall. So they're quite a good source of information for activity in the United States for those folks who are interested. There's a number of different breakdowns. They have a very easy to navigate website that contains a good deal of this type of information. So I would encourage you to look at it. Thank you, Véronique.
Thank you. Thank you. So it's just a good transition also to our next question, which is really the core of the of what our panel is about. It is the question about, you know, which kind of effects had the pandemic on your startups, whether it just on the plus side, on the minus side, on the change of paradigm sometimes. So I'd like for this, I'd like Tabea to start. If you had some outlook on, you know, what was the effect of the pandemic on your startups?
Yes, thank you. I would like with the negative part. I would like to start with that. Maybe then the bandit is ripped off. Maybe we had a lot of founding teams that were about to start before the pandemic broke out. That was the startup was pushed back a lot of times, mostly into the summer or fall of 2020. But still, they did it in the end. That's what we heard from a lot of early stage startups, that that the customer acquisition was nearly impossible in the spring and summer of 2020. And even when everyone woke up a little after the first lockdown in the summer, there was a lot of uncertainties and vague statements after pitch presentations. So that was really a setback. And then a lot of startups that didn't make it were especially those ones who highly depended on personal components, such as workshops, events, or personal contacts at trade fairs. Also the acquisition side. And these are the ones that were really not so well. And also the ones that are already at their scaling point, that were about to make deals across borders, they were pushed back as well because they couldn't meet in person anymore. And especially when there was a high amount of investment into the business or as a new client, nobody would go into the risk without even meeting any time. So the innovative ideas were cut back at first, and that hurt a lot of startups. And we also had a high number of startup inquiries from people who used their free time to the lockdown to develop their ideas and become self-employed with the startup. So that's the other side that maybe comes a little bit into the positive side, that they're still having their business ideas now. Maybe when they're unemployed at the moment, they are going into that idea, and we are doing like a startup weekend where people come together and work on their business ideas together. And we had that the first time this spring in 2021, and there were a lot of teams coming together, just remote and no physical contact, and they were really good. And 3 out of 9 teams are still working on that idea and are about to start up here. So that was a huge success, even out of the pandemic, that they used the free time to turn the ideas around now.
So basically, yeah, sorry.
Maybe I just stopped with the negative things now, but yeah, basically the time that was offered was a good thing for the new startups coming through.
So basically, yeah, it boosted creativity, and that's one thing you mentioned also, Bruce, as well. Laura, what's your input for these questions? I mean, the pluses and the minuses of COVID-19 on your startup ecosystem.
So I hate to be focusing on the silver lining, but really I think the pandemic was great for us. It allowed us to step into our own and discover our own strengths. It was really quite something. So I talked about how it is that Vancouver and British Columbia had been doing this shift towards technology, and we knew that we had this ability and this talent pool that was sitting in universities. It was starting to manifest itself into startups in terms of applied AI, in terms of fintech, in terms of augmented and virtual reality. And all of a sudden, as the pandemic hit, it's like as though that part of our economy blossomed. You see it in the financing. We didn't have a significant dip. If anything, in many ways, it accelerated. It was quite something. And I think we all kind of surprised ourselves because we didn't necessarily recognize the power that we had, which evidently existed prior to the pandemic, but now it was almost like as though we had permission to step into it. Some of that, I think, frankly, can be attributed to the fact that, and perhaps large part, is that our public health officer did an excellent job. Our schools stayed, with the exception of the beginning of the spring of 2020, stayed open. And as a result, there were people who were working at home and were able to connect at home without and be focused on their work. And it was interesting how evidently there were challenges that were associated, but writ large, the startup ecosystem grew tremendously, did really well. If anything, it's roaring right now. The negative, and I would say the negative is more so that we have now almost an impatience with things, with blocks that existed prior to the pandemic, and particularly as it relates to diversity and inclusion. So we've known for ages that the most resilient, certainly for 5 years, that there's been ample evidence and data to support the fact that firms that are not only have diverse boards and diverse C-level executives, but are also inclusive at all levels, are more resilient, perform better on a financial level. We've known this, and now we're sitting at the stage where we're saying, well, hang on a second, why do we have this talent pool like this? Why aren't we releasing this talent pool so that it can truly help us move forward faster than we already have? And I'll point, just in passing, I'll point to something simple at the very basic level. I will tell you that 50% of our startups are not founded by women, 50% of our boards are not populated by women, and that's just easy math. That's just the 50-50. That doesn't take into account all the other intersectionalities that are potential. And I think it's anecdotal at this stage, but we're seeing the funding that's coming from the federal government, from the provincial government. We're seeing new VC funds that are focused on, as an example, on Indigenous-led startups. We're seeing it, and there's this general popular support towards saying, this isn't something we're willing to tolerate anymore. This is something that has been holding us back. We, as I say, we need to release that talent pool.
And we'll go more probably deeper into this a little bit later on. I will pass the mic to, thanks Laura. I will pass the mic to Chris, and then I've just seen that Rania has actually been able to join. She had connections problem. So Chris, if you could go over the plus and minuses of the impact of COVID on your startup landscape, and then Rania will be able to have a little bit more time because she had the connection issues.
Sure, no worries. The semiconductor industry is very much global in nature, or certainly has been. And Véronique, you already mentioned the supply chain shortages that we've seen. And that's really a result from a perfect storm of trade barriers that we've seen erected over the last few years, but particularly with COVID, that's caused these fragmented supply chains to change. Now, one of the cultural issues that's come about is also about each nation trying to secure its sovereign capability. And although we haven't seen the fruits of that yet, what it's actually achieved as an unintended consequence, if you like, of the pandemic, is it's created lots of national cultures where there's an intention to reshore. Now that creates an environment that's ideal for designers that want to start up and to get into what has really been an impenetrable industry because of its global nature and because of its dominance by very large organizations. It now means that we have an environment where actually each nation and each state can create its own ecosystem that can play a part in that, and that then favors a lot of startups. So we're very much trying to encourage that to happen with new funding that's become available post-COVID, and an attempt to address the sovereign capability issues. What we have seen is an effect on things like conferences, which is a great way of meeting new people and encouraging startups. And obviously that's been affected by the pandemic. And we have seen skill shortages all around, which in effect can be a deterrent to both startups and to larger organizations. And some of these are down to the issues that Laura mentioned and that we'll be touching on a little later.
Thank you, Chris. And yes, the question of reshoring and the questions of where is the supply chain is located is very important. I'll now pass the mic to Rania, who is finally able to join us. And welcome, Rania. Sorry you had some issues. And I'd like maybe you to take a little bit longer to explain who you are, where you come from, and also what your startup is about, because it's about also creating a startup.
Okay.
Rania,
hi everyone. Sorry to join you a little bit later. I am going to present myself. I am Rania Khelil from Sfax, Tunisia, Africa. I am actually, I am in real life, I'm a teacher, a university teacher, an English university teacher, you might understand. And actually, I have developed my own startup because I thought that it was time for us teachers and people who are deeply related to education to find ways to develop the educational system in their country. So what I did is I tried to set up a platform, an educational platform that could link people all over Tunisia, no matter what their level of education is, if they're pupils, students, or professionals, and they are able today to choose teachers all over Tunisia, multidisciplinary teachers. It means they can boost their skills, they can boost their soft skills, they can boost languages, they can you know, improve academically, they can improve their level. I have to say that this is deeply linked to where we live, because we have a problem of a distance problem, because you know, southern regions and regions in western regions in Tunisia, they don't have the same opportunities of success as the eastern ones, because you know, there is a big difference between big cities and a regional you know, between the deeper regions in the country. So what I wanted to do is to find a solution so that, you know, our mission is a non-stop education for everyone, anytime, anywhere. So I am not only going to talk about my platform, which is an educational solution that was launched in 2019, and I am also going to talk about the whole ecosystem in Tunisia and what we did during the COVID-19, so that you know, it had huge effects, you know, as in the whole world. But actually what has emerged is awesome, because we had, it's the spring of startups in Tunisia. We had more than 500 startups labelized by the Ministry of Telecommunication, and they were, you know, they were supported by the government also. There were plenty of initiatives by the government to support these startups. 32 of them, they are in Sfax. 32 startups were initiated in Sfax or launched in Sfax. The top 3 sectors that we have plenty of startups in agri-tech, biotech, which are 21%, IT startups, 18%, and edtech like mine, like DOT, it's 15%. So we also have 20 enablers and programs. We have objective, with the objective of financing startups, providing guidance, monitoring, and funding. And you must know that a startup, is a startup needs monitoring and needs to find way as to know how to get financed, how to get funding, and how to support itself during the early stages. We also have especially in SPACs, where I belong, we also have 3 business incubators, a technology park, and 1 business center, which is SPACs Business Center. And they really displayed efforts to save startups. And we also have what we call the SAVE initiatives. We had the SAVE initiative by the government, supported by regional efforts, so that the startups don't stop their activities during the COVID-19. But I have to say that if we talk about EdTech, I mean education, I have to say that it has bloomed. I mean that during the COVID-19, what happened is that the startups that are related to education have proved efficient. It has turned from plan B to plan A, and then it has become part of the culture, because we have to say that many people in Tunisia, they are not very used to Teams, to Zoom, EdTech, technological devices. This is new in Tunisia. So a new culture has emerged. The teachers, they have tried to use, our schools also have tried to use e-learning as a second measure, so that they don't stop education. A lot of efforts were deployed, and actually I have to say that even our platform, what we offer during the COVID-19 is the free use of the platform for all users, because education and health, these 2 sectors are very important, and they really have to be supported, and they shouldn't stop. So we have proved efficient. So contrarily to most startups which witnessed a slowdown in their activities, what we actually have witnessed is a 30% growth every month. Fortunately for us, and unfortunately for people who suffer from the COVID, but for sure, e-learning now is it's a new concept that is slowly getting rooted into our ecosystem.
So basically, what you're saying is that the pandemic actually brought an opportunity especially for education and health tech, as well as reach out to some regions that were pretty kind of neglected, right, in Tunisia.
Exactly. So it brought a kind of equal opportunities of learning, equal opportunities of success, and equal opportunities to get access to information during the COVID, because we have to say that, we are a third world country, that we are doing our best, and the government is doing his best so that he can promote startups and promote e-learning, but still individual effort and individual investment in things you believe are essential in your life, as a citizen in your country. And this is main initiatives have been started by people who, like me, believe in whether health initiatives or EdTech initiatives. All these have really contributed to great things during the pandemic.
Yeah, that's definitely one of the conclusions we'll probably reach the end of the panel for sure. If I may, I will just also pass the mic to Valérie, because from our conversations, I got also that some of the effect of the COVID were pretty negative, because she had to change a lot of things, but some of it just enabled the full change of business plan or business pattern, basically. So Valérie, if you could maybe elaborate on this.
Yes, we started commercializing in October, right 6 months before the first lockdown. And we had a very strong business plan, as every entrepreneur doing a startup. We had great numbers, but that's not about numbers. That's about the scenario of having B2B sales. We were supposed to sell our products to hair and beauty salon, and they went down. I mean, we reached 0 in March. Under the lockdown, no way that they would spend any money in buying products to sell to customers with a closed shop. So with the other co-founder, we thought, okay, we're gonna have to find a solution very quickly if we don't want to die in 2 months. And we also had another problem. It's that we were too young to get governmental financing. We couldn't have any help plan because we were just commercializing for the last 6 months, and we didn't have anyone on the payroll. So we had no money coming from the region or from the state. So we thought, okay, we're going to change everything. New business plan. Let's go for digital marketing. So we had a online shop, of course, but we didn't plan on having 91% of our sales on our online shop. And we had to get on the learning curve very, very quickly, how to sell products, how to market products, how to show a sense of reality of your products on a screen. That's extremely difficult. We are selling things that smell, there's things that you can touch, and that's why we needed to have B2B sales. And we had none of that with internet. So that was really a great learning experience. It was a bit scary when we saw that we really had to reach another level in terms of digital marketing and commercialization. But it really helped us to progress super fast. And now we have the other problem in which we have 91% of our sales coming from our online shop and online activities, including being sold by other platforms and internet and so on. But also, when you have a shift in the market, as it is currently the case, you have a shift in the way people buy things. And at the moment, they don't really buy online. People want to go into shops. So we have a quick change again. So from weeks to weeks, it's completely different, and we have to adapt to that. And that's another constraint. While we are a startup, we are, well, you know, what is the life of a startup? You have new problems every day, and you need to find new solutions every day, and you do. Otherwise, your startup disappears. So that's adding more uncertainty to our development. That makes it really that makes us very agile.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. Talk about agility and the complete pivoting in a very short time. So, well, I do hope that I mean, this will be an asset in the years to come. So that means that you really are able to pivot and to be very agile concerning your market. If I go to Bruce, if you could elaborate also on what you had actually started about the how people would feel about creating their business and the things they would not accept and things like that about the COVID-19. Could you please tell us more about it?
Sure, and I'd also like to index back to a couple of comments already made by some of the other panelists, especially Laura's comments and Chris's comments. But you know, one of the points that I wanted to touch on here on the positive side of the impact of COVID was, and this was sort of surprising to me, and this came out of a conversation with a collection of venture capitalists that operate in upstate New York in our ecosystem. And it was that in general, startups were looked at in maybe a little bit different, through a little bit different set of criteria, a little bit different lens than in normal times. With the onset of COVID after the initial shock had subsided a bit. So in fact, there was an increase in certain sectors in deal flow because of the types of in certain areas of investment, they were considered to be, you know, relatively more attractive than they might have been had all of the, you know, the negatives, if you will, of the initial negative impacts on business that occurred at the outset of the pandemic. So that was interesting to talk about with some of the investors to see how that had changed their view of things. Now, whether that remains permanent or not, probably will revert back to more normal criteria as things recover. But it was interesting that was one of the positive impacts during that period of time in the second half of 2020. going back to a point that Laura made about diversity and inclusion, I mean, definitely in the areas that I'm active in, our organization is active in, we see a much sharper focus now on mobilizing parts of the population to move into fields of STEM technology that have in the past not been very well represented. So this includes different parts, different demographics of the population, but also geographies that are not as connected to urban environments as some of as actively as the institutions in urban environments have been. So that's definitely, I think, a positive for the future, in that we should be seeing more emphasis on mobilizing a larger portion of the population to support advanced manufacturing technologies like semiconductors, infrastructure that's considered to be critical. So this infrastructure investment that Chris mentioned, I think has also driven a recognition that it's funding of the sort of nature that's being talked about in the United States in the semiconductor industry, for example. I'm sure it's been in the news in most places. There's $52 billion that is being discussed for bolstering the infrastructure for the semiconductor industry in the United States. So that is the intent, and the hope is that that will drive people who have in the past maybe not collaborated, have not connected dots on a national basis towards a larger vision to do so now. And so that's one of the things that people are hoping for. On the negative side, uncertainty, especially in the early part, the first half of 2020, I know a number of companies that we work with experienced a lot of frustration due to uncertainty, particularly in public funding, either whether it was through the state or the federal government, because things were basically in limbo for a while while the dust was settling. That has started to return more to a predictable state, but definitely many startups, especially in some of these innovative technology areas, were impacted by delays or uncertainties in funding availability.
Thank you, Bruce, and it's quite a lot food for thought, that's for sure. Gabriel, if we end up this turn of question with you, what about the consequences of COVID-19 on the startup ecosystem on the Grenoble scene? Do you have some specific ideas? You mentioned here recovery plan, digitalization, but also slower trading here. Could you maybe elaborate on this?
Yes, sure. I'm not sure it will be very specific if we compare to other ecosystems we just listened to now. But in a word, I think there is a question of time with a slower effect, or slower like on trade because of the lockdown, for example, and the delaying effect with some projects which have been delayed to after the uncertainty period, for example. And in the same time, we have an accelerating effect on all the transformations and like the digitalization, for example, or a stronger focus on challenges which are more linked with society issues like health in particular, or environment. So all these effects, I think they are shared also by other ecosystem, as well as the question of recovery plans, because of the numerous bankruptcies, unemployment and failures, etc. Local governments or even national governments have proposed strong support to the economy sector, and we can see here of course, a positive effect with first the awareness of the situation and of the economy, a stronger head for certain companies and not the newest one. And of course, in the same time, all these strong support will be introduced in the time, in the future, in debt, in public debt. So this is once again a question of time. But I think the awareness is now stronger to support some of the companies and the entrepreneurship, which has profit from this period of uncertainty to boost the creativity, as it has been mentioned before, for some of the entrepreneurs, of course.
Thank you, Gabriel. And you mentioned also when we discussed on one-to-one that one of the COVID effects was that there was going to be a change in the lifestyle and habits, so that just had also some consequences on the types of sectors. You mentioned for example, the soft mobilities. Could you maybe share some of your experience with this, related to some companies that have really thrived because of the change of habits of people?
Yes, you're right. We were thinking in particular about the clean mobility, as we called it here, such as e-bike, e-scooters, and but it's also true if we look at public policies. When we saw provisory bike lanes developed on the road during and between the COVID crisis or COVID lockdowns. So this is also a kind of accelerator of transformation, but transformation to some new way of considering our population needs, as I was mentioning before. So effectively, if we consider, for example, the e-bikes, so we have here in Grenoble this company called e-bikes lab, and I think the crisis has been an accelerator for the company. But we can also think to the hydrogen sector, which is also now really boosting, exploding. So for hydrogen sector, it's always dangerous. And I think here again, the COVID crisis has been an accelerating factor.
Yes, of course. That's definitely one thing that if, from our different conversations, we can see that the change was not only about the businesses of these startups and the financing, but definitely some society changes and some issues that have been addressed. People not accepting some of the facts that they used to accept beforehand. And there was one question that was raised by quite a few panelists, which was the question of diversity, of inclusiveness, and basically whether it's concerns indigenous population or women. So I'd like on this topic, I'd like maybe Laura, Valérie, or Rania to go on and maybe share not only what they see, but also what they feel about this. Laura, if you could start maybe.
Thank you, Véronique. I think I've expressed the strength of my feelings about it up to this point. But just to touch on more of what Bruce brought up, of talking about rural communities and including rural populations in startup ecosystems. It's been interesting. We've seen, so this is side effects of pandemic. So people started working from home. And as a result from working from home, people then started looking around and saying, where do I actually want to live? And we've seen the housing market as a result in British Columbia, but elsewhere in Canada as well, has been hot. people have been moving out of cities into smaller communities because they're saying, if I'm going to be stuck at home for extended periods of time, I don't want to be stuck in a tiny apartment downtown where my whole point is to just simply commute to work. The fallout of that, of course, is that there has been tremendous impact on the downtown communities and the small businesses in downtown. The flip side of that is then you see this energy that has been brought into literally islands off of the coast of British Columbia that suddenly have people who are digitally commuting and are starting their side hustles because there is more of an appetite, more of an interest for people to start their own mini startups. We see there's a startup that was just funded recently that's called Commit. It was 6 million in funding. It wasn't a huge investment, but to me it's a bit of a signal because we have this flip side, right? We have like Trulio, they got 476 million in the last few weeks. And they're one of our superstars as an example of fintech. But Commit, what I just wanted to talk about is because their focus is on how you can have software engineers be able to market themselves internationally. And software engineers are an easy one to be able to move to online availability. But there's so many other options in that, and that empowers rural communities to participate in ways that they hadn't before. There had been this mass exodus with industrialization towards cities, and we're seeing it move back into rural communities. And the other side of that is therefore to include rural communities, the people who are part of rural communities, as well as marginalized groups. You mentioned Indigenous groups who historically have been part of rural communities, and that this be viewed as being a strength, not just simply as being somebody that is groups that are kind of behind that need to be caught up, but instead be valued for what it is that they can bring and the perspectives that can be brought. At this stage, I think a lot of it is anecdotal, where it is that we're looking at this and saying there's opportunity. I get a sense that we should do something about it. And so we're seeing some government funding to help it. At this stage, we're seeing there's a few visionary VCs that are investing in it. I think in the next 5 years, if I can be prescient, we will look back at this time and say, this changed, this was a crisis that we used to hopefully to make BC a better place.
Thank you, Laura. And Rania, what's your outlook on this? I mean, do you think there are some trends that have emerged during the pandemic and that just brought, changes considering this problem, and that will just stay, that will change durably the landscape?
Well, as I told you, as I am, deeply concerned with e-learning in Tunisia, I actually think that, a new concept has been introduced in Tunisia, a new concept of e-learning, a substitute for the classroom traditional way of learning. I think that this can deeply motivate people to improve and to change their life. It means e-learning now is giving the opportunity to people to boost their career at any age, no matter where you live, no matter what you do. If you want to learn something now, today, you can easily do it through online education. And actually, I think that this has a deep impact on society. So we also have this social impact issue of e-learning on our population. But besides e-learning, I think that the health tech, I think that, what we have seen, actually, we have seen that, engineers now, they are getting more involved in their projects and reinitiating their projects as startups and fueling them so that they fit a new, the whole concept is inventing tomorrow. And this goes hand in hand with the startup era that we are witnessing today. We are inventing tomorrow. We are, impacting the society in a way that can improve the life of people in the future. I think that the COVID-19 has its positive and negative effects, but I think that the positive thing about the COVID-19 is how much eye technology, the eye tech, or the innovative spirit of the startups, how can they change the way we live today and the way we are supposed to live tomorrow. So there is a new concept that is born, new methods are being used, a social, I think that it's a social, it's a network of people, putting hats together so that they can change the lives of people today and change the life of people in the future. I think that the the startups today, the effect that they have on the social life, it is starting today, but it is for sure going to impact the life of people no matter where, as she said, people, they live differently from in cities and rural areas. I think that today there is where you are born and where you live is no longer important, as you will have the same facilities of life no matter where you are. I think that people all over, even in North Africa, if you have if you have access to technology, it is going to give the opportunity to everyone to improve his life no matter where he lives. So it is a new concept of giving new opportunities to people, investing in the future of our country. And I think that there is a new spirit coming on, and people, I think that the ecosystem is what we call the effervescence, it's a blooming period for the ecosystem with innovation. Innovation, has sprung, I think, with the COVID-19, although it has drastically, impacted the economy. But I think that a new wave of change is coming forward, and it is going to be to bring great results.
Okay, yeah, you're right. And Valérie, and this is not only about diversity, but as you mentioned the basically also the way people feel and how you have also to translate digitally the concept of touching and things like this. And then Bruce, also I'd like to you to afterwards to speak about how there's really kind of a culture, really a cultural shift or revolution about, finding ways of having a balanced life, and how the well-being also is something that's very important, and opportunity also for businesses as well. Valérie?
Yes, we see that consumers, at least in our markets, really want to have products that are more local, more responsible. And it's something that we've seen in the beauty industry coming for a long time. We've been talking about this eco-responsibility and so on, but it hasn't really been translated into numbers, into market shares. And now that's the case. And with the COVID, we see that we really have a change in the way people consume, in the way people consume beauty and well-being. And that's why things like holistic beauty, which takes care of both beauty and well-being, has more than a market niche today. So we really see major trends coming. We've been talking, for example, about natural beauty since 2000. Many brands do promote natural beauty, but what does it mean in terms of market shares? It means 6% of international markets in beauty. So that's not much. But this is what we are currently looking at. Is it really growing now that we have been through the beginning of COVID? And I don't know if it will last or not. So that's a big question. That's a big question. I think that the trends in the way people consume beauty and well-being are really, really changing. But I want to see, I think the next 18 months will be very, very important to see if the trends is confirmed or not.
Okay, thank you. That's true. There's a really big trend in, having I mean, consuming products that are more locally sourced and that just basically was more sustainable. Bruce, when we talked, you mentioned the fact, yeah, that people want to change their lifestyle and they pay attention, and then that it will translate as well into a choice of careers or the choice of companies they want to buy from.
Yes, no doubt. I think we've heard elements of this in different discussion points through this panel, but the work-life balance going forward from here, as things recover, will definitely the equation will be different. I think going forward. I know I've been in discussions with a number of startups, but not limited to startups either. Well-established companies also are looking at this both from a standpoint of practicality in terms of business costs. So for example, some of the people that we interact with down in New York City, when we talk to them and we say, when are you going to be going, returning to, the routines that you had before? And, many of them say, well, especially those who are in service sectors say, we're thinking about that and perhaps we will never go back to that. And the reason is because, of course, in some of these, highly densely populated urban areas, New York, Northern California, the cost of space to do business is very high. So anything that can be done to reduce that without losing productivity is something to consider. And since everybody was forced basically to operate remotely, I think there's a realization that can be accomplished in many businesses. And from the employee side, right? I mean, I think they will be looking at how they want to work, and that will be a factor in retention, how long employees stay, and what they'll be looking for as they move throughout their career. And I don't think those things are going to go away. I think those are trends that will endure long after the pandemic is thankfully behind us. So it's interesting because in this panel, even though we represent very geographically, diverse areas, there's some very common themes that come out of this, and I think that we all sense that we will see very positive impacts coming out of this period of, adversity and dislocation. And as startup people, we all know also that, all startups go through adversity. That goes with the territory, but it's what you do after you encounter adversity that matters. And I think, I'm very encouraged by what I hear from all of the panelists in terms of what's going on in their ecosystems. And there's a lot of reason for optimism and hope.
Yes, thank you. Tabea, do you have also something along this to say, or maybe some other aspects that you'd like to point out considering the impact of the COVID? Or
Yes, thank you. I would like to go into the investments that we recently had, especially the startups that are thriving through this pandemic. One is called Potsalat, and it is a delivery startup, especially for salads, with just e-bikes and e-mopeds, I think it's called. And then they are all doing it with a sustainable manufacturing, and you can go into the store and pick it up, or they bring it to your house. And they had, like last year in April, they had their highest high of sales. So they managed to get an investment of 2 million euros this spring, and they want to reach out more locations here in the rural area, but also open up more stores all over Germany. So that has really been scaling up, and maybe that didn't happen if the pandemic didn't break out. So the next one that is really interesting is the startup called Grape Alliance. They are a tech startup that brings tech into wine. So they unite users, winemakers, and wine retailers in one of the fastest growing wine data hubs. So they managed to get a 7-digit financing round last year, and then the investors followed up this spring. So the Essen-based startup, we are actually having a wine startup here, but no winemakers. But we can see that they really created a big push, because the winemakers were really not digital at all. So they really opened up their eyes with their grape manager that collected the data over their sales and the retailers and the online stores. And so the winemakers could really improve of the digitalization during the pandemic. And that wouldn't have happened so quickly if they weren't forced into it because of the pandemic. So that was two food startups that really thrived. And the one startup that was really good here in Essen was a technology company called Talpa Solutions. And they are offering a software that connects mobile heavy machineries and collects data and translates the machine data into concrete actionable insights for machine manufacturing and the operators, so that there is a predicted maintenance, so that can reduce unplanned downtime and improve safetiness on site. And that was one of the startups that really suffered, because they couldn't go into the different countries that we're operating at, and they were losing almost their contracts with their new clients, or their acquisition was canceled. But gladly their investors founded a Series A funding round again with 4.5 million, so they could go on with their new scaling strategy, so that they didn't go out of the market now. So that was really lucky. But that was they were really big here in Essen already, so they got a little bit lucky that their investors didn't give up on them.
Yeah, what I see in what you're saying, that basically we can see that digitalization has reached sectors, more traditional sectors, as well as agriculture or food industry. And that just maybe just a really short word from Chris about this digitalization of the whole economy and the prospects that of course it brings. What do you have something to add on this particular topic, Chris?
Well, I think a lot of it's been covered by the other panelists. Obviously, 18 months ago, before the pandemic struck, we probably hadn't heard of Zoom or Teams and many of these other features. And now, of course, we use them many times each day. But not only that, we've also seen a growth in areas such as healthcare technologies, sensing and so on, which again opens up possibilities for new startups and so on, but really shows where the markets are likely to grow in the future. And digitalization is really at the heart of that. Mind you, winemaking has also been pretty lucrative during the pandemic as well. But I think what we have seen is something that was going to happen anyway, but it's been accelerated by COVID, and the speed at which we've adapted, I think, is very impressive. We now really accept the new technologies. I do think that we will return to some sort of normality, and if we look back in 10 or 20 years' time, this will be seen as a very exceptional period. But there will be some stickiness in some of the technologies, the digital technologies, that will change the way we work, such as e-learning. I think it will change the way that colleges, universities deliver, in that certainly in the UK, there's been a reluctance to take up some of the e-learning technologies. I think now that people are used to it and they know that that's a way that it can be delivered, it will become much more standard. So I think what we've seen is a real acceleration in the adoption by the public of the technology, and now their demands and expectations are increased.
Okay, well, thanks everyone. I think we're running a little bit late. I don't think I just carried on because there was not no questions from the public yet, but I am going to ask my colleague Andrea nevertheless if she has some questions by the audience back there, Andrea. Okay, she says no. I mean, everyone is getting tired, I guess. So I'll just, that will be the conclusion then of our panel. It was a very interesting panel, and we had many speakers. So I know that sometimes it might get frustrating because there's very much to be said, very much to be, very much to be learned, and there's still a lot to say about these particular topics. We can see that anyway, especially on the startup scenes, there's been a lot of changes due to COVID. Some of them, bringing difficulties, but a lot of them also bringing new outlook, bringing new habits as well, and maybe having some business pivoting or having some new business as well, and also reaching out also that, and that's I think that's a very important conclusion, reaching out to new public, enabling new people also to have new habits as well, and to reach out to some other regions, some other population, and hopefully, I know it's kind of corny, but for the good of the population, and to change the society for a better society. That's what everybody says, but I do hope that crisis is going to bring these type of changes, and of course startups being very agile, being able to pivot, and being able to really to get these inputs very quickly are one of the most important means of having these changes. So I'd like to conclude this panel by thanking all the speakers. First of all, thank you for joining us. It was really enlightening, and I do hope that we can meet in person, in real life one day. That would be great. I'd like also to thank all the organizers of the forum, because then it takes a lot of back office as well and organization to do this. I'd like also to thank my colleagues, Andrea and Alexandrina as well, who manned also the back office, the slides as well, and have been really active in this. And I hope we can see you guys very soon. And in the meantime, we'll just, this has been recorded, and we'll just send you the recording and the slides, and we'll make sure that this is all being communicated as well. So don't hesitate. We'll just send out also the emails of everyone, and I hope to see you soon. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Goodbye.
Well, so yeah, if you
Are
want
we
to
having
write,
the debriefing?
Are we staying?